right, so here we are going to discuss the various types of synovial joints. Some examples of what we're going to go over, we're going to talk about ball and sockets, which are exactly what they sound like, condyloids, saddles, hinges, pivots, planes. There are some other ones that are included in your text, but these are some of the ones that we're going to go over in lecture. So, plane joints, what are they? They are flat articular surfaces that allow for short slipping or gliding type motions. So if you just put the tips of your fingers over each other and just short little gliding movements over them, that's a plane joint. Where do I find these guys? The classic examples of these guys are going to be your intercarpal and intertarsal joints. So the example here, this is an intercarpal joint. So is this and this one over here. Hinge joints, think elbow, think knee. We're going to have a cylindrical projection of one bone fitting into a trough-like depression in the surface of the other. Think like a hot dog bun. The hinge of a door. That's going to be that motion. We're going to move through one plane of motion. So if you're stick your arm out and start doing a bicep curl, that is a hinge joint. The ulna and the humerus are forming this hot dog and hot dog bun type shape, and it's actually shown here, by the way. The other place we see this is our interphalangeal joints. So start bending your fingers, straighten and bend, straighten and bend, straighten and bend. That's a hinge joint. Each bend in your finger is a hinge joint. If you stick out your pointer finger and you bend that first joint towards the tip of the finger, that is the distal interphalangeal joint, the DIP. If you move down to the next joint, that is the proximal interphalangeal joint, that is the PIP. They're both hinge joints. Pivot joints. Now, pivot joints, you probably haven't thought about them before. Hinge joints are going to be found, or sorry, not hinge joints. Pivot joints are going to be found when we have the rounded end of one bone protruding into a ring formed by another bone and or ligaments attaching it to that bone. Okay, so where might we find this? There are two examples here. This guy up here, this is the proximal radioulnar joint. So we'd have actually your humerus socketing in here at the hinge joint, and then where the radius, this one right here, sockets next to the ulnar joint, that is a pivot joint. It can move around the ulnar, and in fact, put your palm up for me, extend your arm, put your palm up, and then flip your palm down. Notice how your lower forearm kind of goes face down with your palm, but your upper forearm is just kind of shifting slightly towards the side. That's because of that pivot joint, where the radius kind of spins in place along the ulna at the upper end, but the lower end actually moves with the ulna to go down. Other place, and the far more important place, I mean, not that this one's not important, but the much more important place is the C1, C2 joint. So there is a portion of your second cervical vertebrae that sticks up, and it's called the dens or odontoid. And when it sticks up, it then will join, or not join, like bind to, but make a connection with the inner ring of the first cervical vertebrae. During lab, make sure you take a look at a C1 and a C2 vertebrae. They will be out, but it will be pointing upwards, and it will make contact with the inner surface of the first cervical vertebrae. Then, now this won't be shown in lab because these are models, But then there'll be a ton of ligaments that wrap around the front side of the odontoid, anchoring it to the C1 vertebrae. And it is responsible for us being able to turn your head towards the right to look over your right shoulder. Now turn your head to look left over the left shoulder. That is your odontoid, your C1, C2 joint, pivot joint in play. Another type of joint is the condyloid joint. The condylar joint kind of looks like a ball and socket, but not quite. Instead of a spherical ball, it's more oval shaped, and it will fit into a oval shaped depression on the other bone. Examples of this: find where your finger connects to the palm of your hand. That is a condyloid joint. So the metacarpal phalangeal joints, that's going to be a condyloid. If I were to look at where my carpal bones, my wrist bones, connect to my radius, that would also be a condyloid joint. And then we have a saddle joint. Now, saddle joint is exactly, picture a saddle, and then picture your legs going into the saddle. That is a saddle joint. We're going to have a convex and concave surface as shown here. And the classic example for this guy is where the thumb meets the palm. So this guy right here, the carpometacarpal joint of the thumb, is a classic example of the saddle joint. And then we get to the ball and socket. The ball and socket is exactly what it sounds like. It has a spherical head on one bone, and it fits into a spherical depression in the other bone. Classic examples of this are going to be your shoulder joint, your hip joint. These ball and socket joints allow for almost 360-degree motion. And in fact, in the case of our shoulder, we can move our shoulder in basically 360 degrees. So if you're standing, go ahead for me and move your arm in front of you, bring it all the way down to your side, then bring it all the way up and as far back as you can. Then bring it back down, bring it up to shoulder height, bring it all the way in front of you, cross over in front of you, then put it all the way out to the side. Then go ahead and wrap your hand behind your back and try and bring your arm up to hand up to touch your other shoulder. Now, depending on your flexibility, you might get more motion, and some of us will get less motion. But it's all because of that ball and socket joint. Now, you could also have done the same thing standing up by moving your leg, lifting it up as high as you possibly can, kicking it back as high as you possibly can, crossing it all the way in front, bringing it all the way out to the side as you can. But you'll notice that in some directions there's even less motion, even though it's a ball and socket. And that's because of the depth of the socket. The hip joint has a very deep socket. There's a lot of bone encasing and surrounding the femur head, versus my humerus head, where it articulates with the scapula. There's not a lot of bone, and that's actually seen here. It's sitting in a very shallow depression. And what actually keeps my shoulder, my humerus, attached to my scapula isn't so much the bone, but the bajillion ligaments and tendons that wrap around in that same space. Tons of ligaments, tons of tendons. This is where your rotator cuff tendons are going to come into play, keeping it where it's supposed to be. All right, so that is going to end our synovial joint types. From here, we are going to go into various structures and various types of specific joints, such as we're going to talk about menisci, ligaments, bursas, tendons, intervertebral discs, which is that jelly pad, cartilage pad between the vertebrae. So we're going to talk about some very specific parts found in joints. That will be the next audio.